Welcome into the official Colts podcast. We are in the living room as we usually are. Fun day here today, guys. Fun day for a lot of people, sad day for other people. Larra, Overton, JJ Stankevitz, I'm Jeffrey Gorman.
Busy day all around.
Busy day all around.
Whichever side you're on.
This roster of the Colts, the 53-man roster, is making its way today. Obviously, we're going to go over that a bit, but it does change a little bit, guys, with these cuts being, and teams making these rosters all across. There's good football players out there, JJ, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, the important thing to remember about the 53-man roster that is in front of everyone who's watching this.
It's the initial.
It is the initial 53-man roster.
And we don't mean initials like JJ Stankevitz. We mean the first 53-man roster.
That's good. No, there's still going to be movement. The Colts in years past have made moves on Wednesday. They've made moves on Thursday after setting the roster on Tuesday. So
because there are really good players that become available that might be able to make your team better that weren't available the 24 hours prior.
Right. So still some movement, still some things to happen with this roster. But right now, the Colts 53-man roster is set. You can look at it on Colts.com if you haven't seen it already. You can see all the roster moves that the Colts made to get there, also on Colts.com. I'm sure we'll talk about some of them here, though.
Absolutely. I want to go with the surprises over this roster. Let's start with LO. Surprise cuts that happened today. And keep in mind, some of these players, they will never wear a horseshoe on their helmet. Some of these players will be on the practice squad, and they will come up at some point. But the surprises from earlier today, Larra.
One thing that Casey Valli and I were talking about is the fact that you have 6 draft picks from the last 2 drafts that didn't make this roster. So that's one thing that's pretty interesting in there. Also it's one of those things where, last year it was Darius Rush, maybe was one of those like surprise guys who we kind of talked about being a draft pick, but who went on, got picked up, found his path to another team and with another team. So yeah, when you're looking at it, just, a few of those like a Jalen Simpson, Micah Abraham, Jonah Lalu from this class, from last year's class, it's Titus Leo, Jake Witt. I think Evan Hull is pretty interesting when you look at the fact that it is 3 running backs on this initial 53-man roster.
So I thought when we're going through preseason, it was sort of like, okay, I think there's a chance the Colts could keep 4.
I thought so too.
As things were moving on, and you saw, Tyler Goodson had a good training camp kind of throughout it. You saw Evan Hull start to come on toward the end of it. But to me, the thing that this comes down to is, are you going to keep probably a 4th running back or a 10th offensive lineman? And you're always looking at, could you elevate someone from the practice squad as a running back, which the Colts have done in years past. That's how Tyler Goodson got up. You remember Deion Jackson a couple years ago. Those guys came up from the practice squad. I think it's a lot harder to hang on to good offensive linemen who you trust. So it comes down to, you're looking at that 10th lineman, whoever that might have been, whether it was Dalton Tucker, Danny Pinter, whoever it is, those guys both have value to the Colts. And it's hard. There's inevitably going to be a really hard roster cut every year. I imagine it was really hard for the Colts to move on from Evan Hull, given that they drafted him last year. They saw, a guy who's got good pass catching skills, a 3rd down back who runs hard. That was probably a tough cut. But Tyler Goodson, credit to him here, earned his way onto the roster because he's got some real juice to him with the ball in his hands. And, the people might question, well, he had that drop at the end of the Texans game, and, the ball is a little bit inaccurate on the throw. But when Tyler Goodson got a chance last year, for the most part, we saw pretty good things out of him.
I also, just to Goody's credit, following him over the course of training camp at the preseason, that guy embodies resilience to kind of shake off what he did, put in the work that he did, and try to overcome some of that. That's tough, right? And I just thought that he demonstrated so much just professionalism and just that dogged work ethic and that mentality to just kind of come in fresh perspective and have something really to prove, as he came into 2024. A couple of guys I thought Chris Lamons was a little bit intriguing because he had played that backup nickel spot behind Kenny Moore, so that's interesting.
By the way, I'm sorry to interrupt. Who's taking that slot?
Right now,
because like you said, Lamons played pretty stinking good behind Kenny Moore.
Look, you hope you don't have to get to that point.
Right.
You could always have, maybe it's a Chris Lamons coming back to the practice squad, or like Abraham coming back to the practice squad. But if it came down to it, do you start playing around with Julian Blackmon, who played in the slot in 2022? You got that flexibility. I think Nick Cross has got a little bit of work in there over the course of his career, maybe not as much, certainly in game situations. But that's an interesting one, Jeffrey, just something to keep an eye. And maybe that's somewhere where you do see a move in the next couple of days is, hey, let's bring in that that backup slot corner who can contribute on special teams.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but before we not forget about Tyler Goodson, but great point by you, because I felt terrible. We felt terrible for the team, the city last year when he dropped that football against the Texans. And we saw the emotion after the game out of that young man. We saw what it meant for the city. And the city was like, hey, if he catches it, we win. It's not true. But, I mean, it would have helped.
There were plays everyone could have made.
Yeah, there was that thing. So to see that come back and persevere and have a hell of a training camp and make this roster again, tip of the cap. So I just wanted to make sure people knew about it. What the hell of a story, because that kid probably didn't sleep for a week after
Speaking of
last
a
season.
really good story and a guy who I think caught a lot of attention over the course of preseason, rightfully so, was Laquan Treadwell. I think he made it very intriguing and created some tough discussions, within that room as to what to do with him because of how well he played. No matter who was in at quarterback, you could count on Laquan Treadwell in that situation.
But I thought that receiver room
it's so competitive. It's so deep.
I thought the way it kind of coalesced was like there is a solid 6.
There is.
In that room that you saw make this roster. And I thought for anyone to even crack that, like you're talking about pushing out, at that point you'd be pushing out Ashton Doolin, a guy who the Colts
It would be more of a conversation of do you keep 7, which would be a stretch.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So, and that's a stretch on this roster.
Yeah.
But you're not pushing Ashton Doolin out because they trust him so much on offense to play all 3 receiver positions and on special teams. And you're not pushing Anthony Gould out because he had a really good training camp. And you want to talk about, the Colts let a 5th-round pick go in Jalen Simpson. Well, Anthony Gould on the other side of that absolutely earned his way onto this roster.
If real quick, week 1 happens, no Josh Downs or Josh Downs is in. Who's running in that slot position offensively? Who do you think will get the most reps if Josh Downs has to still miss a week or 2 of the start of the regular season?
Yeah, I think it'll be a lot of Adonai Mitchell there. That's kind of what we saw in the preseason. He's got the body type and the ability to get in and out of his breaks and create separation from the slot. Even though he's 6'2", 205, maybe not your traditional slot size there, I think you'll see Michael Pittman Jr. a little bit in the slot. And you could also mix and match it with your tight ends, or maybe you go a little more heavy on 12 personnel and get 2 receivers on the field with 2 tight ends, whether that's Mo and Kylan. Or Ogletree, Will Mallory. You can mix and match those guys and be a little more flexible. I think that's maybe the big takeaway I have about this offense is that last year the Colts kind of had to be static, right? They had to be 11 personnel pretty much all the time with the same guys out there. You had to be Pittman, Pierce, and Downs because you didn't have the receiver depth behind those guys. And then at tight end, you could go 12 personnel. You could, they did that a decent amount. And there's still some flexibility there. But I guess when the Colts were in 11 personnel, it was like, well, we know who's going to be out there at receiver. This year, you can be a little more flexible. Maybe you move Pittman into the slot because you trust someone out there at the Z. Or you move Mitchell into the slot, and you got these 3 big dudes, Pittman, Mitchell, Pierce out there at the same time.
Good luck.
Like that. I mean, you could. This is going to be a much more flexible offense in how Shane Steichen
robust, if you will.
I like that.
Robust.
Robust is a great word.
Good word.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks. Well, one thing, we've buried the lead just a little bit because one of the more intriguing conversations surrounds some news that came in over the last, day or so regarding that whole practice squad emergency quarterback designation and how much that impacted the Colts' move to keep Sam Ehlinger
Explain
and
it.
keep 3 quarterbacks. JJ, I'm leaning on you because we had this conversation a little bit earlier.
Yeah. So
Can I ask a dumb question?
Yeah.
Like my feeling or my senses on this, the emergency quarterback is a real thing in the NFL. You're going to dress. You can be a practice squad member, but you're dressing. You're active. First stringer goes down. Second stringer goes down. Hey, practice squad guy, you're in. Why can't the Colts do that is my question, the elephant in the room question, with the Sam Ehlinger. Keep him on the practice squad. Open up a roster spot for another position possibly.
So, all right. So here's where we're at with the emergency 3rd quarterback. Teams were notified. This is from Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk. Teams are notified in July that the league, the NFLPA, had vetoed the league's resolution on the emergency 3rd quarterback. So last year, the emergency 3rd quarterback rule, which came into place after the 49ers were down to almost having to play Christian McCaffrey at quarterback in the NFC Championship.
Yeah.
The league made a rule that if you can designate a 3rd quarterback on game day who does not count toward your active 48-player roster on game day. So that's why you have to have an actives, because you can only have 48 active players on game day. You can have a quarterback, a bona fide quarterback who will come into a game if your two quarterbacks who are active get hurt, but he doesn't count against your 48. So it's essentially like, in case of emergency, break this glass and put this guy in.
Really? Okay. But
I don't know if any team even used it last year. But so the league...
I just keep thinking back to that New York game 2 seasons ago when Matt Ryan was inactive, Nick Foles went down, and it was like, oh no, if Sam Ehlinger gets hurt...
right, who's going to come
There
in
were
at
some
quarterback?
interesting conversations that I was involved with on the sidelines, doing some quick math with my girl Melanie Collins from CBS, who was on the sidelines that game that we were going through in that situation.
So the NFL this year presented a resolution which passed that said that third quarterback could be on the practice squad. And you can elevate him to the active roster on game day, but he doesn't count against your 48, and he's still your emergency third quarterback. The NFLPA vetoed that. I believe what I read was that they kind of made it tantamount to like legal stashing. So you're paying a guy practice squad money when he should be on the active roster, which is a big difference.
Okay.
So the NFLPA vetoed it. No one publicly knew about that until NFL Network's Tom Pelissero reported it on Monday. I guess the league sent a memo recently kind of reminding
that
teams,
front offices,
that this is...
So front offices were aware. They weren't taken by surprise
were aware
as much
of this
as NFL
before
fans
Monday.
were. Yeah.
But I think that did change roster math for a lot of teams where, okay, maybe you went into training camp thinking we're going to have our two quarterbacks on the roster, and then we'll have a guy in the practice squad who's our emergency. Sure. Now you have to carry that guy in the 53 again. So you saw Sam Ehlinger make it. Now, I'm not so sure that Sam Ehlinger would not have already made the 53. Mm-hmm. I mean, who's to say that, right? Like, he had a good training camp. You know what you got in him. And if you want to really insulate yourself as a team, you want to have Sam Ehlinger on it.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Who knows? It
Does
doesn't
Bean
matter
come back
anymore,
around on practice squad, do you think? Make his way back, you think?
I think there's a strong chance.
I agree.
Jason Bean on the practice squad.
Right.
I think so as well.
Yeah, had a fine.
But so real quick, this is why I think whatever the reason, whether Sam earned his way on the 53 in the old rules or he earned his way on the 53 because the Colts needed to, they couldn't risk losing him now that you can't keep him on the practice squad, whatever it might be, he's on the team and he's an important part of this team because you need that emergency third quarterback if something were to happen just to get you back to shore. Like, you can't be, I kind of equate it to like you can't be a mile out to shore and then all of a sudden you lose your boat.
Right.
Like, you need a life raft. And that's what Sam Ehlinger can be for this team, which is a really, really important thing to have.
All right, coming up, don't forget, we're going to hear from Chase Daniel, the former
Speaking of quarterbacks,
in the NFL.
Speaking of backup quarterbacks.
Chase Daniel, done well. I mean, he's having his own TED Talks on how to make great money over the course of a great career. Chase Daniel, and a fellow University of Missouri graduate. We got to throw that in for our own J.J. Stankevitz.
Thank you.
That will be coming up. But while we're talking about league rules and then this third quarterback thing, just kind of stay in the ruling of this thing. Cover the IR, and I want to start with Samson Ebukam. If you could cover the new IR rule, injured reserve rule, that the Colts are placing 2 players on it that have a possibility of returning this season.
So I'm going to try to do this a little more short-winded than the quarterback thing, which essentially, there's so much information knocking around there that it's hard to get out sometimes. You can designate 2 players to go on injured reserve today on roster cutdown day and still have them come back this year. Previously, if you placed a player on IR before roster cuts, they were out for the year, no matter what. So the NFL amended that rule. So you would, if you say, like, remember a couple of years ago, it was with T.Y. Hilton in 2021.
Oh, yeah.
Where T.Y. had to be carried on the initial 53, even though he was hurt, and then he got placed on IR the next day, and then he came back for week 7 or 8, whatever it was. Now you can say, these guys are injured right now, they're going to be on IR, but we think there's a chance they can come back this season. So the Colts placed 4 players on IR today. That would be Samson Ebukam, Cameron McGrone, the linebacker, Jelani Woods, and Juwan Winfrey. 2 of those players were designated to come back, which would be Ebukam and McGrone. So that means Jelani Woods is out for the year.
Season over.
His season is over. Same thing with Juwan Winfrey. His season is over. But for Samson Ebukam and Cameron McGrone, they have a chance to come back. Now, Ebukam, when he got hurt, it's an Achilles injury, and you're sort of like, all right, well, he's out for the year. Joel Erickson from the Indy Star brought this up. This is a really good point, that there was a situation a couple years ago. Remember Cam Akers, the running back on the Rams? He had an Achilles injury in July, and he was able to get
activated. He came back for the playoffs, right?
He came back before the playoffs. He came back right at the end of the season. Now, that a lot of stuff has to happen, right, for that to even be a possibility. But I think I thought it was notable that Samson got hurt, and within 24, 48 hours, the Colts made some roster moves, and one of them was not putting him on IR. So your antenna kind of goes up there of like, okay, they think he might be able to come back this year. Because if you thought there was a 0% chance, you put him on IR and you clear that roster spot. But if you think there's a 1% chance you can get Samson Ebukam back this year, you absolutely do what the Colts did
December,
today.
January, February possibilities?
This is a devastating turn of events for a second year for Jelani Woods, who showed so much promise, these huge flashes, right, of the target he was, especially in the end zone, like making huge plays that rookie season.
Guy won the Chiefs game. He beat the Super Bowl champs.
I mean,
It's a rookie.
absolutely devastating, heartbreaking for Jelani. I also look at it as there's some definity to it, different from, remember last year it was, okay, you kept having this flash of promise. Oh, he's working back, but then it's maybe a setback. It's kind of this back and forth where you hope that with having definity to it, this is the injury, this is how long it's going to be, we have a plan. Maybe there isn't this kind of lingering conversation or speculation going on of what's going on, and that just allows him to do the things that he needs to do to get healthy, focus on that, and maybe, not that it was ever a distraction, but I sometimes think that it's just better to know and have realistic expectations of what you're facing going into the regular season, rather than a little bit of a back and forth thinking that, oh, there's a chance, oh, maybe it's not as much of a chance, maybe there's a chance, then no.
And look, he's going to have an uphill climb in 2025, but he'll have a shot in 2025 to work his way back up and earn a spot back on this roster.
Damn, this league, man, it will, oh boy, have so much promise. A guy coming out, mid-round draft choice like that, and a mismatch that we talked about, a red zone mismatch, and just injury after injury, can't get back on the field. Such is life in the NFL. Larra, Overton, JJ Stankevitz, I'm Jeffrey Gorman. Don't forget, Chase Daniels coming up, a good conversation with JJ Stankevitz about Anthony Richardson, Shane Steichen, and this Colts offense. But we continue with this roster right now. JJ, start with you. The depth. What's the deepest position of the position groups of this roster?
It's D-line.
Yeah.
I could make an argument that it's wide receiver, but it's defensive line. And that is also crazy to say with your leading sack guy from last year being out for the year.
Right.
Or potentially out for the year in Samson Ehlinger.
Yeah.
So that is a testament to the work that those guys have put in, the scouting that Chris Ballard and the front office have had to develop that group. And the Colts cut some good players from that D-line, guys who have contributed. Eric Johnson was a contributor to this defensive line in years past. Jonah Lulu was a draft pick this year. They were up against it, especially a D tackle. So, and then you saw it wasn't just Latu coming through in training camp and making plays. It was Adetomiwa Adebawore showing a ton of growth during training camp.
I think he was like the training camp, like, I don't want to say like MVP, but to me, he was the guy that made the biggest strides from the end of 23 to the start of 24. And that's not my, kind of take. That's talking to scouts, talking to different people around the building, just how many gains he was able to demonstrate from when they even left mini camp in June to reporting to camp in July.
I mean, look at that. Like your top line guys on the defensive line are really good players. Obviously, DeForest Buckner, Grover Stewart, one of the better interior tandems in the NFL. You've got at D end Kwity Paye, who's made some moves this year. He looks like he's in for a big year.
He is.
I thought Tyquan Lewis had a fantastic training camp. And then,
coming off the best season of his career last year. Like, that's
and
just steady
continuing
build.
to grow.
The first opportunity he's had to just have a fully healthy year going into a fully healthy offseason. Whew.
And then, Laiatu Latu to me had one of the top 5 training camps of any player on this entire team. So that's your top end depth. Then behind that, you got Dio Odangbo right there, a guy who had 8.5 sacks last year, pretty good.
And then Davis.
Isaiah Land earned his way onto this roster. He's got some real juice to him as a pass rusher. And then behind the D tackles, you got Adebawore, who again had a great training camp. Raekwon Davis, who the Colts really prioritized in free agency to come in, and then Taven Bryan, who's back.
Yep.
To me, that group is just stacked. And the Colts are looking for 8. They might have more than 8 coming out of that D-line rotation this year.
I'm really encouraged to, and this is maybe an underscored conversation, this linebacking core
I'm glad you're talking about
is doubt. And something that we talked about, I've had this conversation with EJ Speed in how, you have kind of your starting linebackers, but you end up, there's so many different combinations that you play with. And he, talked about all of the guys' interchangeable pieces early in his career, even prior to it being he and Zaire Franklin as, the 1-2 guys within that room. And I look at this group with, of course, Zaire and EJ. Shagun Alubi had a phenomenal preseason, great camp coming off of what was a great 24 for him. Grant Stewart, who we have seen not only be able to be, special teams dominant, but he can also be a playmaker on defense. And then the guy I might be most excited about, like Mizzou Mafia showing up, JC Carlisle. Like,
it's a powerhouse program.
Yeah, indeed. I just think that group is probably, like, if we're really going to nerd out on some depth chart stuff now, which I love, like, that's a group to me that I think you really reinforced this year, that the guys coming back, the returning guys, all got better in my eyes. And then you gave them even more strength, speed, and power with the addition of Jalen Carlisle.
Yeah, I mean, look, linebacker is not a position necessarily that you rotate a lot, right, with those top two. Like, you think Zaire and EJ, if they're healthy, they're playing 100% of the snaps the entire season. But then Carlisle kind of worked his way into being the third linebacker within the first team defense during training camp, which I thought was really impressive. And that guy maybe plays 10 to 20% of the snaps the way the Colts play defense, but that still is like, hey, credit to the rookie there. Shego Alubi, as your backup Mike, you feel really good about that with his, if something happens to Zaire, like it did last year with Carolina, okay, Alubi can step in, guy had a pick in that game, played really well. So you feel like, I totally agree in that linebacker room. The other one I want to bring up is wide receiver.
Sure.
From where the Colts were last year to where they are now with the wide receiver depth.
What was the conversation that everybody was having this time last year? Do the Colts have enough playmakers? Do
they have enough wide receivers? They carried 4 wide receivers on their initial 53.
Right.
And because enough guys didn't earn their way on the roster. And now we're talking about, man, Laquan Treadwell is really up against it. DJ Montgomery was really up against it. Those guys I thought had 2 pretty good training camps.
They sure did.
And last year it would have been like, I think both of them are on the team. But this year, because you had such a great camp out of Alec Pierce. Like, to me, Alec Pierce, we're talking about top 5 camps. He's in that discussion, potentially, to be in there as a top 5 guy this camp. And then Doolin, like we mentioned, so important. Anthony Gould kind of wormed his way into, hey, we got to get this guy in the offense a little bit. And then, obviously, Mitchell, Pittman, Downs, those guys are, kind of set up there. So that group looks really strong. And you feel really encouraged if you do, especially we're talking about Downs. If he needs to miss week 1, potentially with the ankle, you're not worried about it. The way last year, you're kind of, all right, let's white knuckle it through this week if we don't have Josh Downs or Michael Pittman Jr. out there.
Do you know what Anthony Gould told me in just talking to him through the joint practices and preseason games? I asked him what helped his confidence grow the most. And he said he really was able to build confidence and gain a better understanding of the offense because he had to make plays with every single quarterback. He was in basically every situation. He was in there, with, the rookie guys at times. He was in there with Sam. He was in there with Flacco. Between, it was Flacco and then it was Sam and then it was also Anthony. So he was saying that all of the different rotation that he was playing with and being able to be adaptable regardless of who was throwing the ball. And I thought that was really interesting and something that can be tough for a rookie, right? To say, okay, no matter who it is, whatever different style of quarterback I'm with, I'm still able to be that guy.
All right, let's touch on the offensive line a little bit before we get to Chase Daniel and JJ coming up here. It's a young group: Tanner Bortolini, Gonsalves, the rookies that made the squad this year. Obviously, Blake Freeland's a young guy coming back with some veteran, some play under his belt, if you will, and that Dalton Tucker. What do you guys feel over this thing? I mean, as a whole, because as a whole, we're young and we're old. You know what I mean? But that's a good thing because we have the experience up front, especially right in the middle of that offensive line, and then we've got these young guys that are backing him up, and Danny Pinner made the roster again.
Yeah, it's great to see Danny back. Of course, he had that devastating injury in the third preseason game last year. No joke, guys. I was holding my breath a little bit because he came off after that Jason Bean touchdown. He was getting taped up on the sideline, and I'm like watching intently. I'm like, oh, okay, just kind of taping over top of the cleat, like nothing serious. Right, yeah. But yeah, it was a little bit like bated breath for a second just because of what happened last year. But I think Danny has continued to produce value and reinforce what he can do when he's been brought in a number of different situations. And I think it's important to have him because he's kind of that bridge from your starting guys to all of these rookies and young guys who are behind him. He's kind of that in between those. I don't know if we'd call it two eras. It seems a little bit drastic, but you know what I mean? Those guys who have been up front for a while, Ryan Kelly, Quentin Nelson, Braden Smith. And then he's in that group of steady depth behind all of the new guys who you're bringing along, Gonsalves, Bortolini, Dalton Tucker.
I kind of like, though, this young depth the Colts have that they're trying to cultivate because you have such a veteran offensive line. So, like last year, okay, say Braden Smith missed some time last year, right? And you got Blake Freeland kind of thrown into the fire there. Well, okay, you got some vets on that line who can kind of help him out, who raised that standard, who set the standard and set it really high within that room. I like that. Okay, hey, let's try to develop Blake Freeland. Let's try to develop Matt Gonsalves and Tanner Bortolini and Dalton Tucker as guys where I don't feel like, essentially what I'm saying is I don't feel like this team has this like red line need of like, you got to go get a vet tackle because the rest of the line sets that standard so high. Whereas if you're dealing with a young offensive line that's got some rookies starting, that's got some year two guys that are starting, maybe you do need to go get that grizzled 10-year vet to come in and just be your swing tackle because maybe the standard isn't as set as it is in that room by, like you mentioned, Larra, Q, Braden Smith, Ryan Kelly. Like everyone who's in that room knows why they're in that room. They believe they have a spot in that room, but also that standard is set through the roof. And you got to match it every single day. So for all those young guys, I think that helps them develop behind the scenes. And then you get better players by raising their standards and raising the standards for them, and you get more development out of your Freelands, your Gonsalves, your Bortolinis, your Tuckers.
Also, Danny Pinter's dad makes the best salsa straight out of his garden.
That's the kind of fun facts.
Straight out of his car?
Garden.
Oh, garden.
Yeah.
We talking Verde or Roja?
No, Roja. It is
Really?
like traditional salsa. I actually polished it off last night. Danny is so great. He always brings me a little bit, lets me have one of the little mason jars in training camp. Yeah.
Right here, chips in next week.
Okay.
Please.
Yeah, next
I'll
week,
let, I'll let Danny know.
Chips
I'll
and
put in an
salsa.
order. Yeah. Guys, it's so legit. I can't buy anything store. I do buy anything store bought, but like after it's a big drop off. After I get Pop's Pinter's salsa.
This is the kind of analysis that you can only get on the official Colts
That's it.
podcast.
Truly
We got Danny Pinter salsa.
No
That's-
one else is coming at us with that. I love it, though. That's great.
Because certainly the world's best salsa does come from South Bend, Indiana.
Yeah.
Right?
What if it was
Obviously.
called Danny Pinter's dad's salsa? That was like it.
Pop's
It was like-
Pinter. I just always called Pop's
Pinter.
Pinter. Pop's Pinter salsa.
Can you get it in a pint of? Get it a pint?
Oh,
a pint?
well.
No.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
this
That
one
was
off the
tough.
rails.
That was tough. Move on. Get out of here.
Chase
Get out of here,
Daniels,
Junior.
save
Get
the
out of here.
conversation.
Give
All
me
right.
to Chase.
You can yell. We're getting to Chase. You can yell at me after this really quick, Larry. Surprised if from here on out, next couple of days, Colts make a move after recent cuts around the NFL that they bring in reinforcements at the safety or cornerback position.
I think you feel pretty good about what you've got right now.
So there would be a surprise there if they were to go out and
what do
pass
you
it.
think?
The one thing I would say, just back to our conversation, is there is a bit of a need at slot corner. So do you think about maybe that guy's a practice squad guy, maybe that's a different roster move that comes in, and then safety, you've got kind of your three there that all have flexibility with Blackman, Cross, and Rodney Thomas. Trevor Denbo's a great special teamer. He hasn't played a whole lot on defense in his career. So, I mean, if you need him to go play, he can go play, but do you add another body in that safety room to just say, hey, like, in case we need it, we've got it?
How much does it indicate Trevor Denbo's value on special teams? Like to pretty much make it based on that, right?
Yeah,
Like
guy had the third
90% of it,
third most special team snaps on the team last year, and is like one of the guys who I think Brian Mason trusts the most in that group. And like, I think to anyone who was paying attention during training camp, it was sort of like, yeah, Denbo's on this team. He's got a spot on this team, like
Yeah.
100%, absolutely.
All right, keep your eyes on the Colts roster. You can find it at Colts.com. Ever changing, but hopefully locked in, solidified for the time being, getting ready for the Houston Texans, who are coming to town for the regular season opener at Lucas Oil Stadium. Now, here's what I love. I love listening to quarterbacks that are out of the game because they play 12, 13, 14, 15 years, and they never say anything. But boy, oh boy, as soon as they put that helmet down and that locker shut for their career, they start chirping and they start talking, and you're like, oh my gosh, these guys are some of the smartest guys you're going to know. Well, you're going to get smarter here, I promise you. Here's J.J. Stankevitz and Chase Daniel talk about the Colts offense and this roster as a
All right, it is my pleasure to welcome Chase Daniel to the official Colts podcast. You can listen to Chase on Scoop City, his podcast with Diana Rossini on The Athletic. Subscribe to his YouTube page for all of his breakdowns at Chase Daniel Show. And starting September 3rd, you can catch Chase at 10 a.m. Eastern on the facility on Fox Sports 1, one of the busiest men in NFL media and a rising star. And before that, of course, Chase spent 14 years in the league. And before that, I got to say it, was a Heisman Trophy finalist at the University of Missouri. Chase, appreciate you coming on, man. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, I appreciate it. You make me sound too good. I'm just grinding, man. I played for 14 years, and for me, it was one of those things where when I knew that I was done with football, I wanted to cover the game somehow. And I just like the grind of the schedule. So the kids are all at school now. We got a 7-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 3-year-old. They're going to school. So I actually get a little bit of time during the day to do my thing. I'm going literally as soon as I get off with you, I'm going to scarf down my lunch from Sweet Greens, and I'm going to coach my 7-year-old flag football team that I'm the head coach of. So we're busy around here, but I like the grind, and I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, well, the reason why I reached out was you did a breakdown of Anthony Richardson's final preseason game that you can watch on your Twitter at Chase Daniel. You can watch it on YouTube, on your YouTube page too. And I thought it was great because like after that game Thursday night, there were so many hot takes. There were so many just like snap reactions to, oh my God, what is he doing? Or that first drive is amazing. He's like there wasn't a lot of nuance, I guess. And the way that you broke that down through your all 22, there was a lot of nuance in it. I guess I would encourage anyone who's watching this, listening to this, to go watch the full thing. But Chase, when you broke it down and you broke down what you saw from Richardson, just what was your kind of overarching takeaway, your impression of Anthony Richardson from that?
That's a good question. And yeah, I mean, look, I try to, before I even get into that, I try with my opinions that I have, I try to base them all off of film. Because that is what I know. I know all 22. I know film. I know sitting in the quarterback room. I know sitting in the offensive room. I know sitting in the meeting room where these coaches are going through film. And that's how we get graded. And so when it comes to the breakdown I did of Anthony Richardson, for me, the first thing, and I said it in my tweet, that just jumps out at you on film, and I'm guessing it's better in person, is the arm strength and the arm talent. The dude can absolutely throw the football. There's some accuracy. I wouldn't even say issues. There's some accuracy things that he needs to get better at. He knows that. He wasn't a high accuracy guy coming out of college at Florida. Guess what? Neither was Josh Allen. Okay. And with the right coaching, with the right system and the right fit that Steichen has, like, I do think the stock in Anthony Richardson is rising. It's rising fast. And specifically, when you break down the film, a lot of people want to talk about these 3 missed throws that he had. Well, first of all, he didn't play a whole bunch. 2 of the 3 were not his fault. Now, look, there was a couple throws that he wishes he had back. The pick 6, the tight end should have just turned around, sat there. It's a communication issue. That's fine. That's okay with me. That's what preseason is for. And when Anthony Richardson is fully healthy and gets a full season of starting, which he is yet to have, those communication issues will get fixed on the field. Same with Adonai Mitchell. He having a great year. He has been working a lot more in the slot with Josh Downs out, and that's given him really good an idea of like where he might get to play. And so when I look at those and I look at Adonai Mitchell on this deep cross route in the film, and everyone's like, oh, he overthrew it, he missed it. I tell people that he's supposed to be at 18 yards. Okay, that route is 18 to 22 yards. Adonai crossed it off at about 14. That ball landed at 18 yards for Anthony Richardson. So in my opinion, when I break this down, he knows where to go with the football and what's to be expected. You saw them on film talking. They're going to get it right. I don't have any issue with that at all.
You talked about preseason, like this is what preseason is for, right? Like when you had a communication issue in your career, whether it was preseason, even into the regular season, and we hear like, okay, that's something that can be fixed. How do you go about fixing that for week 1 against Houston? Like, what's that process like?
I don't think it's like an overnight process. I think it's just him staying after practice, throwing with the receivers. And the quickest way I know as a quarterback to fix these accuracy issues. It's just running extra routes with the receivers, with Michael Pittman Jr., with Josh Downs, Alec Pierce, Adonai Mitchell, even Jonathan Taylor out of the backfield, just staying after practice and working on timing. For me, if your timing is right and you're seeing the field right and you have these pure progression reads that I know Anthony Richardson likes, then you're going to become more accurate the more you drill it and the more you throw it. Because guess what? He's not throwing to anyone but Michael Pittman Jr., Josh Downs, Adonai, all these guys, right? So all he has to focus on is getting the timing down with these guys. And it sure looked on film, at least, he was good with the other guys other than the rookies. So these rookies got to get up to his level, especially, like, I love Adonai Mitchell. I think he should have actually went higher in the draft. He's a really fast guy, 4.33 guy. I loved him coming out of college. I think this is sort of a steal for the Colts, and it just makes me think that, man, these guys, Steichen and Ballard, they really believe in their young quarterback because they're adding pieces around him to make him better.
I think one of the things that stood out to me when you did that breakdown of Anthony was that his decision making through all of these plays was good. That he was going to the right spot with the football. He was making the right read. And you also mentioned kind of that pure progression thing. Yeah. Where I think sometimes with Anthony, he gets this label of like it's raw and you got to make it easy for him or whatever. But like that first throw he had to Pierce that you mentioned, he got off number 1 and he got to number 2. And that's what Alec told me in the locker room after the game, was that that's kind of how it went down. The decision-making aspect of Anthony's game, how does that translate to the regular season and benefit him kind of in just like layman's terms as a quarterback?
Well, look, he's still so inexperienced, JJ, right? He has not started a lot of games. The biggest thing for him is stay healthy, protect yourself. He's an absolute freak at running the football. They're going to ask him to run the football. You got to know when to get down and when the journey's over. But as far as what you were saying, I just think it takes time. I think it takes time for you to get on the same page. And specifically when it comes to decision making as a quarterback, because in my opinion, and based off, the 7 different franchises that I've been with in the 14 years that I've played, the number one trait that coaches want from a quarterback is decision making. Do you know where to go with the football and when to throw it and when to release it and when to progress on from 1 to 2? To me, Anthony Richardson is a really good processor of seeing the game and seeing the field really well. That's hard to teach. So if you have a good processor of football, which I think Anthony is, then you can get into football 202. Okay, you want to work this side versus cover 3. You want to work this side versus cover 4. It looks to me he understands when a guy is open and he can throw it right away and understands. He's got this quick release, man. Like it's impressive. And he understands when to throw it and when to move on. For me, that is decision-making 101. Is this guy open? Do I think I can fit this ball in? Which he can fit balls in windows that a lot of people around the league can't, because he has got such a strong arm. And sometimes that can be a hindrance for quarterbacks. I don't think that's the case with Anthony. I think he understands when to move on, and just pure experience playing right. The more you play, the better decision-making you're going to be.
The other aspect of Anthony's game, and something that people have brought up to me that can't be taught, is his ability to kind of navigate the pocket, right? Like I remember when Matt Ryan was here in Indy, and I just sort of asked him kind of off the cuff, like, how do you teach that? How do you get better at that? And he was like, you kind of either got it or you don't as a quarterback. For Anthony to have that and the processing, I guess, what sort of floor does that give him as a prospect that doesn't even take into account all the tremendous athletic ability that he has?
Yeah, look, a lot of times, at least for me, when I'm watching guys in college make the jump to the pros, they don't trust the pocket presence. If they're good athletes in college, they're like, oh, I can just go be a good athlete and get out and run. Well, that's not really playing quarterbacking. Now, I will say that quarterbacking is got like drastically different from when I was in the league to now. When I was in the league, it was like pocket passer, you got to move a little bit. Now it's like if you can't move really around, you can't really play. Anthony's got that in his game. And so what I just love to see is like he's under center, play action, 7-step drop. Hey, that deep out route's not open. He goes to Alec Pierce, first, second play, whatever it was, throws his dagger route to him. It's so pretty. And so to me, it's like he's trusting that process. He wants to get better at it. And he knows in the back of his head, hey, if something's not open, I can move on and I can get out of here and I can escape. And which he did in the preseason. And I think he's saving most of that for the regular season. But also, like, the injury history comes into effect, right? You have to understand that the best ability of a quarterback is availability. I know we've heard it. Can you suit up for the Indianapolis Colts in 17 straight games and hopefully more if you guys make the playoffs? That's the most important thing.
For Anthony, with his inexperience, we kind of talk about he's going to keep on growing, but realistically, Chase, from week 1 to week 8 to week 18, where can Anthony Richardson make growth within a season?
That's a great question. I think it comes down to the offense you're running. I think it comes down to all the skill positions and the offensive line, all 11 guys on that field, right? You look at like a Monday and Tuesday where you're normally off. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you're practicing. Saturday, you're off. Sunday, you're playing. That's 3 practices, 1 game a week. You just got to keep stacking those, man. And specifically, he hasn't experienced a lot of situations in real live football because he hasn't played a lot in the NFL. So I think when situations come up, like a 2-minute drive, hey, you got to understand the score of the game. I need 6 points. All right, a touchdown wins it. Hey, I only need 3 points. Okay, if I'm at the 50-yard line, I just got to get to the 35. It's just got to get a field goal to make this game go on. So all these little intricate details of the game, he's just got to get experience. And so that's the biggest buffer really from the college game to the NFL is everyone's good. Okay. But there's a lot more situational football in the NFL than there is college, and guys just have to get that experience. And I'm sure Steichen and all the crew, they're teaching this in meetings. It's one thing to teach in meetings. It's another thing to actually get actual experience.
I want to ask you about another quarterback on this roster because you have experience. You were with Carson Wentz in Philly. You were with Mitch Trubisky in Chicago, and then Justin Herbert with the Chargers, all young quarterbacks who you got to work with as the backup. What can Joe Flacco provide Anthony Richardson in terms of advice, guidance, just leading by example, stuff like that as the Colts backup?
Yeah, you said it, right? Like a job for the backup quarterback is look, Joe Flacco's been an MVP, right? Like he's won a Super Bowl. He knows his role on this team. And I love the signing from Chris Ballard to come in and sign him just in case Anthony were to get hurt again, or if he needs a little bit of assistance with everything from learning how to watch film, learning a schedule of a quarterback, understanding, hey, on this walkthrough day, we need to approach it like this. I'm sure Joe is bringing his own flair to it because he's been around. He's brought that experience to the room, but he also played really well last year for the Browns, right? And that's one of the reasons they signed for him. And I think Anthony just needs to be a sponge. I think that what Joe can give is that experience factor from all the small, little, minute details that you can just pull out of a Super Bowl MVP's head. Like, to me, that's awesome. And it sounds like he's going to be a good sounding board for him.
Last one for you, Chase. You mentioned a couple times on your breakdown, just talking to you here, how excited you are for this team. Who are a couple guys, a couple reasons why maybe you're excited to watch the Colts in 2024 who are not Anthony Richardson?
Yeah, I mean, I really think that with the addition of Adonai Mitchell, Michael Pittman Jr., I heard from everyone that was at Colts game that Josh Downs was absolutely balling out and a star in training camp before he got hurt. So it just sounds to me that they're putting the pieces in place. And not only do you have a backfield with Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor, you got Mo Alley-Cox, you got Drew Ogletree. I mean, like all these guys, Ryan Kelly, Quentin Nelson, you guys roster-wise have built a really, really good, solid core of guys, and not just core guys, but playmakers as well. But as you know, JJ, it all comes down to how the quarterback plays.
All right, well, that's going to do it for us here. Chase, man, really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to tuning in to you talking on the facility and hopefully talking about a Tigers playoff run, maybe?
Let's go. MIZ, baby.
Let's do it. ZOU. All right, Chase Daniel. Remember, follow him on Twitter at Chase Daniel. Subscribe to his YouTube page. Listen to his podcast. Watch his show. There's nothing Chase Daniel does not do that involves the NFL. Appreciate your time, man.
Thanks for having me on.
A little bit of a fanboy.
I mean, look.
Little
Let's be
bit of a
honest.
JJ's
Let's be
favorite player of all
honest.
time.
I had a Chase Daniel jersey when I was in college at Mizzou. Guy is kind of my favorite quarterback of all time.
That is.
But look,
I'm joking,
I got
but-
it all out of me. In 2018, the Chicago Bears signed Chase Daniel.
Okay.
And
Did you just own it? Did you just walk
Yeah,
up
he did.
front?
100% in the press conference where they introduced Chase? At the end of it, someone else, not me, gave him an MIZ, and we were all like, ZOU, like, and it was like, okay, yeah, but like I would spend 15 minutes at his locker every Friday. But okay, what do you see in Drew Lock this week?
Really?
Tiger's gonna win, we'd just be.
So there was a time fanboy, definitely, but then he became more of a co-worker and everything.
Yeah. Like he had to be a little more professional,
and now-
especially when he went into Detroit and won a game for the 2018 Bears division champs.
And now,
good player.
Let's see, Athletic, Fox Sports. Also with Diana Rossini. He's on a podcast.
Yeah, they've got a podcast called Scoop City with the Athletic.
And he's got all his YouTube breakdowns of all 22. And the thing that I like about him is like he doesn't get caught up in the narrative, in the hot takes of could Joe Flacco be an option, which is like what are we doing here?
Right.
He takes a very measured approach to everything, can break it down from this is how I was taught. And he's been taught by Sean Payton, Andy Reid, just down the line, these great minds of offense. He's worked with Justin Herbert, Drew Brees. He's got some skins on the wall.
Can I just go totally off the rails real quick? Did you hear the story about how the Chargers got locked on the elevator, stuck on the elevator before the
Justin
preseason?
Herbert showed leadership getting off the elevator.
Justin Herbert was like the one keeping everyone like calm
How
for
long?
2 hours.
Oh, God.
They were stuck on the hotel
No
elevator.
thanks. Yeah, I'm out.
Everyone's like putting it out there, being like, haha, Jim Harbaugh said Justin Herbert showed great leadership. Excuse me, if I'm stuck on an elevator for 2 hours and Justin Herbert's keeping me calm, that's great leadership. I want that.
What happened? How many people were in that elevator?
Like 4 or 5.
Yeah,
What do
something
you
like
do
that.
if nature calls in that situation? You don't know when you're getting out. I'm sorry, somebody's got to ask. But you don't know when you're getting out. Could be 16 hours.
You're dying holding it.
You're holding it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the answer then. That's what I was
We're not
going for.
animals.
Well, I'm saying it could be life or death at that point. Everything comes off. The clothes come off, and you're like, no. I mean,
Not if Justin Herbert's in the elevator.
yeah, that's true. Not if. I'm just saying, if
All
I'm
right,
ever,
all right, hey,
if
you
I'm
get-
ever stuck in an elevator, bro, I am going through the roof. I'm going to be like the guy from.
I feel like I'd just take a nap. I'd be like, somebody wake me up when we get out of here,
all right.
Like,
You get stuck in an elevator with one Colts player. Who's going to get you through it the best?
Oh, wow. Okay. Great question. I'm going to say Zaire Franklin.
yeah, that's not a bad one.
The only reason is because it's an easy choice. Like,
I-
I'm calling him, if I'm attacked by a gang of deviants, I'm calling Zaire Franklin because he's going to get me out of that. And if, there's a hostage situation, I'm calling Zaire Franklin, say, hey, could you get us out of this?
I don't know. I'm kind of going D-line. I'm like either like DeForest Buckner is going to like be able to reach somewhere and like
That's
like
true.
pull
That's a good point.
like I don't know like
Larry, he's got you.
like,
He's got you like
right,
this.
like,
Yeah,
or
just like,
or Grover Stewart and I would just be in there laughing and
Now that-
giggling
okay.
for like 2 hours.
That's a good one.
Well, we would just straight laugh and joke on each other and like also like I always feel secure in the presence of Grover Stewart.
okay.
Yeah.
Like
nothing bad's going to happen.
no.
Larry's
Like,
sleeping, joking.
I think Kenny Moore II would be a great
That'd be
option
fun.
because if you want to talk
Even
about everyone
very
stay
even.
calm,
Yeah.
everyone stay calm. We got this. We're good.
Oh.
That'd be Kenny.
Jonathan Taylor too would be that way.
Yeah.
Like JT would be like, we're good.
Anthony
Like,
Richardson
Yeah,
would
Anthony
be a good one.
Richardson, absolutely. Maybe Alec Pierce, the engineering major, could find a way to like engineer
Ooh,
the
that's good.
MacGyver.
MacGyver it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Boy, I'd have to shut up.
We got a lot of players who we'd like to be stuck in an elevator with.
Phew, I'd have to shut up because it's over. This thing is over. We had a great run. This thing's going to drop 16 floors. It is done. Like, that's my mentality if there's no opening.
All right,
in those doors.
I don't want to get stuck in an
No,
elevator with
not
you. then.
with me whatsoever. Not with me. Okay, guys, in wrapping and closing, thank you to Chase Daniel to do that. Give me the next couple of days. There's a long weekend off for the Colts, but it starts up for real on Monday. We're going into the Labor Day weekend. JJ, what's going to happen over the course of the next couple of days? And, of course, those important days before Monday starts because you're back on that regular schedule for the regular season, which starts on that following Sunday.
A couple more roster moves coming in, probably Wednesday, Thursday. Then you won't see me. I'll be on a boat on Lake Wawasee for a couple of days.
Chase Daniel?
Not with Chase Daniel.
Okay.
I'll be
should at least extend the invite.
watching the Tigers Thursday night against Murray State.
Okay.
Eli Drinkwitz, their head coach, made this whole stink about how like we got to sell this game out because we're a top flight program, and it's like, yeah, you're playing Murray State.
Go Racers.
Yeah,
Not go Racers.
Take Murray State
But
the
yeah,
points. Okay.
So then Monday we'll have a practice back here.
Yeah.
And then we're into game week.
Yeah, it
Tuesday's
is.
an off day for the players, and then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, game practices.
We're going to have to get you a Dalton Tucker jersey, Larra Overton.
On it, right.
Okay.
I want to give a shout out, by the way, to Colts director of production, Drew Davidson, who looks just like Dalton Tucker. He looks just like him. I wish we could put a side-by-side up, but this is really only a bit for us internally here. But, I mean, he looks like just like Dalton Tucker.
Bro, the guy, I was doing the pregame show at Colts TD Town, Touchdown Town, and I saw Drew from across the way. And he was a dude in overalls that were cut off here, sleeveless, no shirt on underneath it. It was his twin. And I'm going, hey, Drew, you can't wear that today on game day, knowing it's not him. But I swear, the more he walked up to me, I'm like, oh, my gosh, it's identical, this guy. Same thing with Dalton Tucker. I'm doing double takes when he's walking by.
Yeah.
So I'm with you. I agree on it.
Also, Dalton Tucker, good player.
Yeah. All right.
Go Marshall. Go Herd.
Let's go, Herd.
Thunder
Here we
Herd,
go.
yeah.
Let me have this read and we'll get out of here. Colts Audio Network this week, another episode of Inside Football with Rick Venturi. Obviously, the big man coming in, and he's coming in hot, getting ready for this season. The 2-Minute Drill podcast on Thursday. If you're traveling on Labor Day weekend looking for a podcast to listen to, go download The Move. The Move, if you haven't already, about the Baltimore Colts becoming the Indianapolis Colts. Executive engineered by this man right here, JJ Stankevitz. You're not going to want to miss that. And if you do have one of those 3-4 hour drives, plug it in. You're not going to want to miss it. It's a 4-part series, and there's so much stuff to dig through on that one. Then starting next week, full in-season mode. Full in-season mode. That's with Rick Venturi, Inside Football. That 2-minute drill's back, and
Colts
the reaction.
360 is back
Colts
too.
360,
Colts
please.
360 starts up this week.
You will see the lovely Larra Overton on set with
Quiddy
that.
Pay and Shane Steichen
And
on
Shane
this week's
Steichen.
show.
Good poll. Good
yeah.
poll. Bottom line is this. If you want Colts information and the latest and greatest, go to these two. Find them on Twitter at JJ Stankevitz, at Larra Overton, and, of course, on Colts.com. We do this week in and week out, and it is exciting around here. I know you both are exciting right here. There are some more moves to be made, but Anthony Richardson and this Colts offense led by Shane Steichen, here we go. The Texans are coming, and if you're going to that football game, bring your noise makers because we're going to need to hear you. Guys, appreciate it. Have a great Labor Day weekend. Anything before we say goodbye? Have fun tonight if you go out with Tucker.
Thank you.
And, have a good couple of days before the Labor Day
Appreciate
weekend.
it. Will do.
You do the same? Lake Wawasee?
Wawasee.
Okay, Wawasee, Wawaso. Mama say, Mama sa, Wawasu, so. Mama say, Wabasa, Bamasu. Little Michael Jackson on the way out. JJ Stankevitz, I'm Larra Overton. Actually, she's Larra Overton. I'm Jeffrey Gorman. Thank you to Kevin Connors for making this thing possible. JJ, it happens. You know what I mean? It happens. I'll say it. Heck with it. I'm Larra Overton. Goodbye.